All right, guys, it's been a while, but I thought it'd be fitting to make a review video on Throne and Liberty as the official launch will be taking place tomorrow. It is currently Monday evening. I have been playing this game a shit ton. In fact, I have played this game through almost every stage of its development, and I want to be very clear with this video. It is not aimed at trying to really persuade anyone that's on the edge or someone that has really no interest in playing this game, because I truly believe that this MMO is for a specific type of player. And so in this video, I want to explain what I mean by that. And so again, it is Monday evening. The early access started Thursday, and at this current point in time of recording, I have around 66 hours in the game, which is probably a little bit too much, but I do feel like I am qualified to at least discuss on the experience I've had so far in the game. Now, I'll be going over several categories for this review. You can find timestamps down listed below, so you can skip around on the parts that you're interested in. Now, the first thing that I want to touch on is the game feel. This is something that I experienced playing Throne the first time that I touched the game. It has improved tremendously. It is miles better than it used to be. Despite that, anyone that touches the game, you're going to have to try it yourself. It just has this weird sluggish feeling to it. They specifically improved the inertia of the game, which is my first complaint over a year ago, that just the movement felt a bit off, and now it is a lot better. Despite that, it still feels a little off. It does improve over time. You'll hear a lot of people saying that the feel of the game gets better as your character gets more powerful, you get better stats. That has to do with the combat, but there is just this off feeling when you're playing the game. Some of that has to do with the desync. There is a lot of desync that exists in the game, whether it's due to ping or just the game's engine. I think it's baked into the game. Sometimes you'll find yourself getting stuck on a cliff and you're porting back and forth. That's been there forever. Sometimes you catch yourself gliding while casting a skill. Sometimes you initiate on a player and you teleport back and then reconnect due to just the desync of the game. And that is something I'm not sure if they're going to be able to fix, but it is something that I think everyone will notice when playing Throne and Liberty for the first time. Now, the reason I started with the game feel is I do believe a lot of that also has to do with the terrible default settings that the game provides. I'm not sure why it is this way, but when you're playing the game, you really have to go through the settings and adjust it to your liking. There's a lot of customization there, so you can really alter the way the game feels based on your personal preference, but there are so many settings by default that are enabled that I would say are not tailored towards a Western audience. One of these settings is auto move within range to attack target. That means if you click on a target and you activate a skill, it will auto run you to the target, which was how it was when I first played the game, which is very mobile-like. Now, this might be something that you personally enjoy, but I think having that by default is definitely going to add to that weird, clunky feeling that the game provides. So I obviously turned that off. Another one that is not there by default is auto target nearest enemy when attacking without a target. In a lot of other MMOs, if you activate a skill when nearby an enemy, it will auto use that skill on the enemy, so you don't have to click them. And sometimes targeting enemies in this game can feel a bit off due to the targeting settings that you have to go through and adjust yourself. However, if I walk up to this target, which you won't have by default, and press a skill, it will auto use that skill and auto target the mob or the player, making it so much easier to connect as a melee player. And sometimes you get this feeling that you just can't reach the target. There are a lot of things that are like that exist in the game, despite if you have a ton of experience playing MMOs, it's just not clear to you why you're being CC'd, or it's not clear to you why you're not able to reach the target or attack the target. The game doesn't do an amazing job at giving you that feel why you can or cannot do something. And with the desync, all of that, I believe, in combination, creates that feeling of like clunkiness that players describe when talking about Throne and Liberty. And that really brings me to my next point, which is the early game of Throne. When I first played this game, the early game was atrocious. I don't actually know how I made it through the early game and played for as long as I did, but I did because I just wanted to keep going. And as I played through the game, it got a lot better. Nowadays, the early game is significantly better, and that is due to really how many skills they provide you by default in the intro experience. They've also altered the way the early game works. How much experience you need, how you level, how you progress has improved tenfold. Despite that, I do believe that Throne is one of the classic cases that the game improves as you play. And I know a lot of people may not make it through that intro experience despite it being a lot better than it used to be. In terms of the leveling progression, I would say it's pretty straightforward. You follow the MSQ, you get a tremendous amount of experience through the MSQ, and when you run out of the MSQ or the game tells you need to continue to level before you can continue doing the MSQ, you will then go do exploration quests, which are side quests within the area that also give you a lot of experience. Sometimes the quest can be a little confusing. Sometimes you're unsure of how to complete the quest, but I wouldn't say it's the most difficult leveling experience I've experienced in an MMO. But personally, I really enjoyed going through the leveling experience. And that brings us to the next category or section, and that is the world feel of Throne and the visuals of the game. The world feel and visuals of this game, in my opinion, are top notch. As far as the engine of the game, it runs on Unreal Engine 4. Currently, I'm in Vienta and I have 144 frames per second. I have a pretty decent PC, but for an Unreal Engine 4 game, I would say the game looks pretty damn good. And more importantly, the game feels alive. And that's due to how they have the world set up. First of all, you're on these isolated servers for most activities, at least currently, and you see players all over the game that you've seen in the past. I'm constantly interacting and seeing players that I've played with in dungeons, grouped up with, and that really provides that old school MMORPG feeling that you don't get in a lot of other MMOs. There aren't these shards and phases. You do have these bosses, these world bosses that open up and you kind of separate, and that's reduce some lag, but it's nothing that you'll find in like World of Warcraft, for example. The world feel and how the activities are set up across the world are fantastic. It's definitely one of the strong suits of the game. So if that's something that's important to you and that's something that you like as an MMORPG player, you can find a lot of that in Throne and Liberty for sure. With that being said, let's get into one of the more contested topics. That is going to be the combat in this game. Now, the combat has improved so much. It's been changed so many different times. The main feature that has been added, outside of just getting so many more skills, is going to be the skill specialization, which alters what your abilities just do in general. You can transform a skill with a single point, placing it in a talent tree for each skill, and it will change the way the skill works, interact, and it also changes the name of the skill. You can freely change out of these. You have a limited amount of points that you can spend, and it allows for a ton of different builds that you didn't have previously, and I think it has improved the combat tremendously. I have a mobbing build when I'm AoE farming, I have a bossing build and a PvP build, and as far as the feel of the combat goes, it is definitely better than when I played it, you know, back on the Korean open beta. It's certainly better in terms of diversity of builds. It's certainly better in terms of gameplay feel. Is it on the level of something that you can find in an action MMORPG, although this isn't purely tab target? Absolutely not. You're not going to compare this to Black Desert Online if that's something that you really enjoy. If you're someone that loves playing Lost Ark and that is the only reason why you play Lost Ark in MMOs in general, it's not on that level. But for a tab target MMO with the right stats, it will feel pretty decent. It is a lot better than it used to be. One of the things that I would say is surprising is when you're doing these massive fights, the game handles itself pretty well in terms of the combat. Much of that can be attributed to the weapon system that I've touched on many times in the past. You have these different weapon combinations and you choose skills from the two weapons that you equip. You set up a loadout and you also have passives. And these two weapons often synergize with each other to create cool combinations, whether whether you're playing greatsword dagger, bow dagger, sword and shield greatsword, staff dagger, bow wand. There are all these different combinations that you can make, and these passives have a lot to do with that. Whether there's interactions based on CC, interactions based on standing still and getting more attack speed when you're playing a bow, and then using your daggers to teleport to the target but not breaking that movement requirement. There's a lot of cool things there that you can find within the weapon system and the combat system. But again, for someone that's strictly played action MMOs or someone that's played a lot of World of Warcraft, you're going to find something a bit more unique in the game, and it will take some time for the combat system to really come online, but it is definitely improved, and I find it for me to be quite enjoyable, specifically when doing PvP. And the place where you'll be using that combat system is in the content of the game. I mentioned PvP, but I actually want to touch on the PvE content first. Throne is specifically targeted towards more PvP oriented players, but there's actually a lot of PvE content, and much of the content you'll be doing on the daily, I'd say around 70% will be PvE content. You have your daily contracts, which I've touched on in the past, which are just AoE grinding spots where you go out and you kill mobs, you loot various items, and through doing those contracts, you'll receive mats that you'll use to upgrade your skills, upgrade your armor, craft various items, and you'll also receive contract tokens that you can spend, which will give you a lot of various goods in the game, like more of those ores that you might need or trait extraction stones, which I'll touch on a little bit later. Now, for many of you, you're wondering if this is like a daily content you'll have to do, well, every day. The way it works in Throne for all of the daily content is it stacks up. Every day you log in the game, you refresh your contract points, you refresh your dungeon loot claims, your dungeon entries, and it can stack all the way up to 60, which is 60 quests. So if you want to wait all the way to the end of the week to do your contracts, you can. You can certainly miss them, but it allows you to save these, and as long as you never overcap, you're not actually losing out on anything. That works the same for your daily dungeons. Every day you enter a dungeon, you'll spend 300 points, and every day you earn or receive 900 points. You can still do the dungeon if you have no tokens available, but in order to claim the loot, it's just like a lockout for the dungeon, you need to spend 300 tokens. This stacks all the way up to 4,500, essentially giving you the entire week to do your dungeons at the very end of the week if you prefer, or you can do them day by day. You don't lose out again on anything as long as you never overcap. You'll be doing these dungeons for really powerful loot at a pretty low drop rate. Some of your best in slot items might be at a 5% drop rate. It's important to note that it's not class specific loot either, meaning if you're playing a greatsword dagger or a sword and shield greatsword, you can still loot the bow. You're probably wondering why it is that way. I'll explain more when we get to the trait portion of the video, but it's something to keep in mind. Gear is hard to come by, but it is very valuable and it is very impactful. Outside of your daily contracts and your dungeons, there are also world bosses that spawn regularly throughout the day. These bosses drop even better loot and is randomly distributed to the people that are participating. These items are very rare, are worth an absolute ton, and depending on if you're in a guild or not, can be distributed to guild members through various different methods, which I'll talk about a little bit later. You also have a timetable that goes throughout the entire day where various events will take place. Some of these events or bosses, these world bosses, are peaceful events, meaning there's no PvP. Some of them are also conflict or PvP focused. So if you don't want to do any PvP, you can attend events that are PvP-less, or you and your guild can contest for bosses that are PvP focused, or just various events where you have to collect a certain amount of mushrooms, wolf tails, etc. Some of them are guild focused, some of them are free for all, some of them they place you on different teams, and these go on again every hour throughout the entire day. So the way that the gameplay feel will be in this game is you'll be doing your contracts and you'll go attend an event. You'll be doing a dungeon and then you'll go attend an event. You'll be doing a world boss and then maybe you'll go back to completing your dungeons. So the way that they have it organized is it feels like if you're actively playing the game, there's always something to do, and a lot of that again is going to be PvE focused. You also have abyssal contract tokens, which is simply the Agris, if you're familiar with BDO, where you get extra loot as you have this currency build up. You have this bar you can notice at the top right, it stacks all the way to 20k, similar to what I mentioned in the past. If you don't want to play every day, you don't really have to. You don't lose out on anything if you don't log into the game every day. You can log in on your own time, and when you go out and you do this open open world dungeon farming. There are a lot of dungeons that exist in the world. At nighttime, they become conflict. So currently, as you can see here, this is an outdoor or an open world dungeon. You go into this weird temple, and right now, as it's nighttime, it's conflict. So players will try to wipe out the enemies and clear out that area. In the daytime, anybody can farm there and there's no PvP. You have these points that you build up. You drain these points by clearing out mobs, and you get a ton of bonus materials. Despite me saying all of that, this is certainly a game that caters towards an audience that does enjoy PvP. You have arena modes, you have massive guild versus guild battles, you have open world events where players are just randomly taking each other out. You have huge boonstone battles where players are fighting over a point that will offer the claiming guild of that point various stats while they control it. You have bosses that are claimed by certain guilds. It's called a riftstone. So if your guild claims that riftstone, they have access to another attempt at a world boss for additional loot. There is a ton of PvP to be had in this game. And again, for someone that's played years of WoW Arena, a lot of you guys may know me for that. I find it to be pretty enjoyable, despite there being a lot of desync, as I mentioned earlier. It can be a little clunky and frustrating, but if you like PvP v PvE type of content, there's so much of that in Throne that you can't find a lot of that in other MMORPGs nowadays outside of Guild Wars 2 or games like Black Desert Online, which recently they've been kind of shifting away from. So if you're someone that really wants that, you can find a lot of that in Throne. Now, I want to touch on the guild system in Throne of Liberty because I have never played a game that has done guilds honestly as well as Throne of Liberty. There's a ton of things that you can be doing alongside of your guild, and this game certainly benefits people that play in a group. You can be a solo player, you can attend things, you can attend world bosses as a solo player, you can get loot as a solo player, you can do dungeons as a solo player, you can farm as a solo player, but it is most certainly a game that benefits players that play alongside a guild or in a group. And a lot of that can just be shown through the guild merchant. When you do activities with your guild and you participate in guild events, you receive this guild currency that gives you valuable items, especially trait conversion stones that you're going to be using a lot. You get bonus materials for spending these guild tokens. So if you're not in a guild, you're going to be getting a lot less loot than somebody that is in a guild. So it's certainly in your benefit to play in a guild. Now, I know that's kind of counterintuitive to how MMOs are played nowadays. A lot of MMOs today are shifting away from this rely on other players model. Many players are looking for a solo experience, and I totally understand that. But this game caters towards that classic MMO feel where you need people in the world. You're going to be interacting with a lot of players, and it's in your benefit to do so, specifically when it comes to a guild. So hopefully everything in the video so far has already shown you what I meant earlier, that this game is going to be for a specific type of MMO player, and I don't think it's going to be a game that is for everyone. The next category is going to be one that I think is also discussed a lot and is something that will make the game not for everyone, and that is pay to win. Throne and Liberty, honestly, is absolutely pay to win. I can just show you straight up, I'm in a guild, and in my guild, this isn't the case for every guild, it depends on the guild you're in, we have a GDKP system built into the game. Now, when you go kill a world boss, you can randomly obtain one of these world boss items that are extremely strong. If you're in a guild, the guild can set it to where that item goes to the guild bank, and then they set up an auction, and players use cash shop currency that is dispersed amongst the guild, and they bid on items. So both of these items, this one I bought from the marketplace, this one I bought from my guild, is a world boss item. So you can straight up just buy gear and equipment. However, that currency is then distributed to all of the members in the guild, and they can use that currency to then bid on an item that they want or do anything else in the game. They can also go into the shop and buy anything that they want using that same currency. So if you want to buy the battle pass, which you had to previously pay for with straight cash in Korea, that is not the case in our version. You can buy any of these things by simply playing the game. In this game, everything revolves around this currency. The same goes for the auction house. All of these things right here are acquired by players. They then post it on the marketplace. A player that has earned this currency or purchased this currency can then buy that item from you, and you can see how the cycle works. So it's good for players that don't mind pay to win and want to be able to purchase things in the cash shop, or players that just strictly don't mind pay to win and want to simply buy the items. You can't swipe for everything. There are things that you're going to have to go do and farm. You cannot get these dungeon items that I showed you earlier from the cash shop, or you cannot purchase currency to then buy them from other players. players, you can only get these through the dungeons. I have ran this dungeon for this sword and shield so many times and I can't get it to drop. And for some reason, I'm just cursed. So you will have to play the game. You can't swipe for everything, but certainly you can buy things that will give you an advantage earlier on if you want to get things done sooner. And so I've really structured this video and these points to kind of all build up off each other. And this is going to lead me to the trait system, which is, in my opinion, is the best and worst part of Throne and Liberty. The way you make currency in this game really is obviously selling items that you can, but you can also extract the trait off of an item, and that sells for a lot. You can see here that this weapon, this Chernopog's blade, has at the bottom, you see this trait called heavy attack chance. When you get an item, you can extract the trait off of the item and then post it on the marketplace for someone like me or someone else that wants that trait. So when you do these dungeons that I mentioned earlier, you were probably wondering, why can I get a bow if I'm playing great sword and shield? The reason is that other players want the trait from this bow. You cannot sell the bow, but you can sell the trait off of this bow. And some of the traits, especially early on, are worth a lot. A lot of players want to trade out their weapon. And so you can place that trait onto your weapon. The way you naturally get these traits is if you get dupes of the same item. So you can see here right now, this is the Carnix bow, and these are all of the available traits that exist on the Carnix bow. So if you are trying to fully bis your character out, you're going to want heavy attack chance, critical hit chance, or hit chance. These are the traits that you'd want. And you can see here, like this one's selling right now for 2,000 lucent, which is around $40. So if you get one of these, you can place it on the market and try to sell it to another player. Then you can then buy your own gear or do other things in that way. So traits in general are a little bit convoluted. It takes a while to understand. The reason why I said it's the best part in Throne of Liberty is it allows for a ton of crazy customization, and you can see all of the stats here. There are so many different stats and there's so many different builds that you can make for both PvP and PvE. And by allowing you to trait in different stats, it allows for a ton of customization that makes the game extremely fun. So that's really how a lot of the income farming goes, how you make a lot of money. You run your dungeons, you extract traits, you sell them on the market, but there's no denying that the game is pay to win. How much that bothers you is up to you. In terms of PvP, this game is extremely rock, paper, scissors. The way you build out your character, you can't be strong against everything. I'm currently in a full evasion build, but I get melted by magic spells because I just can't fully commit to magic endurance. It's a stat that I just can't commit to because I've gone into melee evasion. So even if I'm super powerful or strong, and I'm playing a very strong build right now, I'm one of the strongest classes or combinations in the game. If I run into a magic user, they absolutely melt me. And a lot of the combat is large scale. So you don't get that same impact that you would find in like a 1v1 scenario outside of arena. I feel super strong in arena. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I obliterate people in arena. So keep that in mind if that's something that you enjoy. Yeah. All of that really leads me to my final grade of the game. I might make a follow-up video of the game as I play it more or extensively, but I have played it a lot. I would give Throne of Liberty a grade C or an average. Now, I know that might seem harsh for the people that really enjoy the game, but I would say most MMORPGs that launch in this landscape are below average, outside of the ones that have been around for like 10 years. And I think for someone like me, at least I can only speak on my behalf. I like playing new games with new experiences. I can always go back to playing World of Warcraft or another game that I've played, but there's nothing like a new MMO launch that is very exciting to me. I get super addicted and I really enjoy that feeling. As I mentioned earlier, this game is absolutely not going to be for everyone, but I do think for the people that it is for, the people that do enjoy that old school MMO feeling that you experienced maybe back when you played Arcade or Lineage, you can find a lot of that in Throne of Liberty. And despite all the negatives that I did mention in this video, I've enjoyed my time a lot. I can't really put the game down. I've had a ton of fun playing alongside of my friends. I don't usually get to do that in other MMOs outside of like instanced content, and there's so many activities that you can do in a group group that make the game really fun. The world does feel alive. I do think there's some things that they could do to improve the game, but I don't think this is a game that can try to cater to everyone. Ultimately, I think it's going to be a bit more of a niche game, but for the people that do enjoy the game, there isn't really anything quite like it on the market today. There's a ton of different content that I didn't get to mention or really mention in this video, like the secret dungeons, which are like solo dungeons that you can do. There's challenge mode dungeons where you can do like a Mythic Plus style system with a leaderboard where you do timed clears. We have Shroud here as the #1 server clear for this challenge solo dungeon. There's an expansion on the horizon with Talandry where a huge portion of the map will get unlocked. So there's a lot that I didn't get to mention in this video, but I think I did a good job of giving you an idea of who this game is for and whether or not it's going to be for you, which is totally on you and what you're interested in or what you can tolerate or what you find enjoyable as an MMORPG player. But that is going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it, found it informative or somewhat entertaining. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.